Good evening, everybody. Good to see you tonight. It is, what is today? May 13th, the seventh Monday of this case. That includes jury selection. It's actually week 6 of testimony in the Chad Daybell case, but week 7 since we started this thing back on April 1st. I'm Nate Eaton. This is Courtroom Insider. So glad you are with me today. We have a lot to talk about. Busy day in court today. Things kept on moving. I think we went through several, 7 witnesses, perhaps 6, 7. We'll go through that in just a minute. Day 22 of the Chad Daybell trial continues, and it seems as if the prosecution might be working its way to possibly closing things up, resting, maybe this week, maybe next week. But that's kind of the feeling that I get. When you look at the number of witnesses, I mean, we're up to 64. And several that have been called twice. So we'll talk about everything that happened today. This is Courtroom Insider, by the way, for those of you that are new, and I know many of you are, because you email me and say, what is this case about? Where can I watch? So thank you for watching. Basically, this is a case that affected small-town Rexburg, Idaho, which is about 4.5 hours from where I am in Boise. The trial was moved from eastern Idaho to western Idaho. Chad Daybell and his wife, Lori Vallow Daybell, both charged with horrific crimes. In fact, here's the charges that Chad Daybell is facing. 3 counts of first-degree murder in connection to his first wife, Tammy. The murder of J.J. Vallow, who is Lori Vallow's son, and Tylee Ryan, who is her daughter. 3 counts of conspiracy, grand theft, and insurance fraud. The trial was moved across the state because Judge Boyce, who was presiding, felt like there could not be a fair or an unbiased jury because, Fremont County, where these crimes allegedly happened, where these alleged crimes happened, is much smaller than Ada County. So that's why we are in Boise. Today, I want to jump into it, but real quick, I thank you all very much for your concern. I woke up this morning feeling a little off, like not 100%. Came over to Boise, and then I just felt like lightheaded, and then when the witnesses today were talking about the tool marks on Tylee's bones, and we saw the bones on the screen, and they talked about the condition of her body, I got queasy, and I've never experienced that before that I can recall at work, where I've covered something that has made me ill, and it did. And so I left at lunch, and thank you to my colleague Caitlin. She took over doing the live updates for me. I came back here, I took a nap. I'm fine now. I woke up and feel good. Hopefully I can sleep tonight. So many of you, I wrote on Twitter that I was, feeling a little under the weather, but I feel great now. So thank you all for your concern. Let's get going. The storm and more. Today was a big day. A lot of momentous occasions on the stand. Here is who we had up there. 7 witnesses. Nicole Heidemann, she works for the FBI. She is a tactical specialist. She was on the stand Friday before we went home for the weekend, and she was back up there first thing. And then we had Angie Christensen. She's an anthropologist, a very smart one. All of these people are so smart. She works at Quantico in Virginia, and she took the stand. She analyzed Tylee's bones and her remains. Ashland Rind, I believe. I hope I spelled your first name right, Ashland, if you're watching. This is Tylee's friend. She described herself as her best friend. She took the stand today. And then we heard from David Sincerbo. I believe I'm saying that correctly. He is a chemist for Idaho State Police. And got to get a drink there. He basically analyzes fires, arsons, things like that. Chuck Considis with the Rexburg Police Department, he was back on the stand, showed some interesting satellite images of the Daybell property taken just days before the Tylee, at least, was allegedly buried there, and then, not allegedly, she was buried there, and then what it looked like after. And then we had Doug Halapaska. Today's a hard day for names. All these people have really cool names. He's a tool examiner. He examined the tools, or he examined the injuries on Tylee's remains and worked to determine what type of chopping or stabbing tools were used. That's the testimony that honestly really got me kind of sick. It's hard to, and I'm not going to play much from him. And if you want to go listen to all the testimony, you can. But it's hard to listen to. I mean, it is. It's hard to listen to. And Nick Balance, and I spelled his last name wrong. There's 2 L's, and I've done that before. I apologize, Mr. Balance. I don't think he's watching. He's a cast agent, meaning he tracks the phones, he tracks the text messages. He went through all of that leading up on specific key dates, like October 9th of 2019, when Tammy Daybell was shot at in the driveway, and then on October 19th when she died. And what happened the day before, what happened on that day. So we'll go through all of that tonight. Let's start with a storm moving in. And just going to say it, I'm going to play this little clip from Nicole Heidemann. She was talking about text messages, romantic messages, steamy messages that went back and forth. If you have a kid watching and you don't want them to hear this, you might want to plug their ears or send them out of the room for a minute. But notice Chad's face. To me, he seemed to smile a bit when this was said. And it's interesting because during the other trial, they had Doug Hart say this. I remember that because I'll never forget when no one knew what the storm meant. And when Doug Hart said it, the women behind me in the courtroom gasped. And then a big storm actually moved into Boise that night. It was a crazy storm. So far, I'm looking out the window, no storms yet, but we did have some cloudy skies. Anyway, here is part of the text messages that Lori and Chad were sending to each other.
The intensity of each encounter in my mind, one greater than the last. Oh my, fire emoji, fire emoji. Especially this last one. I've never loved you more, heart. It just keeps growing. Kiss emoji.
And then that next one, if you could indicate the date and time.
August 9th, 2019 at 9:39:54 p.m. in UTC -6 time.
And who did it appear to be being sent from, and to whom was it going?
From Chad to Lori.
And could you please read it into the record?
I completely agree. We were definitely in new territory in your bedroom.
And then the following message?
At this one,
Date, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. On August 10th, 2019 at 4:38:08 p.m. in UTC -6 time.
And who did it appear to be going from, and who was it being sent to?
From Chad to Lori.
Can you read it into the record?
Elena's magic hand has gripped the storm, and they stare into each other's eyes, barely able to breathe as intense waves wash over them.
And through the investigation, did you learn what storm was a name for?
It appeared to be a name for Chad's penis.
Okay, look at Pryor. I'm sorry. He's trying to hold in the smile. Chad then kind of smiles. You see some sort of reaction there. I wonder if he knew it was coming. I'm sure he did. Apparently, it's storming in Idaho Falls right now too. Someone just messaged me. So, after she finished her testimony, reading some of these messages back and forth, the defense, Pryor, got up and asked her, Chad Daybell was an author. I mean, could it be possible that this was just one of his books? And Heidemann responded, we had no evidence that he was planning to publish this novel, these steamy texts. It just seemed like they were meant for her. And also, we have the whole James and Elena romance novel and whatnot. After she finished up her testimony, Dr. Angie Christensen, took the stand, and she, we saw actually some of the photos of Tylee's bones. She's the anthropologist who works for the FBI, and she described what she got that, I don't want to get too graphic tonight, but that some of the bones still had tissue on them, and that it appeared on one of the bones, a carnivore, some sort of animal had got to it. And she discussed that. She talked about how the bones were, we know this, but they were burned. A lot of them really burned, charred, black and gray and white. And the longer you burn a bone, the white, it becomes whiter. And she talked about that. She went through 100 bones that were submitted. There was a lot of sharp trauma on the bones and thermal spots. The interesting thing is that they asked if there was sign, and again, I don't want to get graphic here, but they asked if there was sign of dismemberment. And she said no, because they don't believe that the body was trying to be dismembered. It appeared it was more just a I don't know, like a hacking, because when you dismember someone, you go for specific joints to try to, disassemble their body, and that's not what it appeared like here. Here's just one little clip that she testified about some of the bones that she analyzed.
These photographs document detail or close-up views of the same sharp traumas depicted in the previous two images. So in this case, I do have them annotated so that they can be correlated to the overall picture of the bone. It also documents in these close-up views some of that bending or hinging of the bone that tells me it occurred when the bone was in that biomechanically fresh state.
So when you indicate that these photos illustrate that the bone was in a biomechanically fresh state, is it correct that you still can't be certain whether it was post-mortem versus perimortem? Is that correct?
Yes. So we classify that as perimortem trauma, being in a biomechanically fresh state, but I can't say for certain that that didn't occur sometime after the death event when the body was still biomechanically fresh.
So it is consistent with both perimortem and postmortem. Is that correct?
Yes.
Perimortem means before death. Postmortem means after death. She's saying they don't know when these injuries on these bones happened. Was it before Tylee's death or after her death? Also that the bones were fresh, younger. It wasn't like as you age, your bones get more. She talked about how they change composition. Tylee, it was fresh bones. I mean, she was young. She was a teenager. And the doctor, Angie Christensen, went into much more depth. We actually saw these photos in the courtroom. They weren't on the live stream, but we saw them. And it's one thing when you're in high school science class and you're talking about the spine and the hip and the joints and you see a skeleton. Okay, but when you know that the thing you're seeing is from a body, they're all from a body, but I don't know if I'm making sense. They're from Tylee. They're her teenage hips. There's markings all over them. They were hacked at. I mean, it's just so hard to understand. The interesting part to me, one of the interesting parts to me of this testimony is that she was asked by the prosecution about another doctor named Bartelink, who's also an anthropologist, who also is a forensic anthropologist, does this type of work. And I didn't connect the two until the defense got up, John Pryor got up. That is his expert that he said is going to testify on behalf of the defense. And do you know what Dr. Christensen said? She was specifically asked by the prosecutor, did you review Dr. Bartelink's findings? She said yes. And she said that there was no significant major differences between her report and his. And then Pryor gets up to ask her about that. And here's how that exchange went.
You mentioned that you published an article or a book with Dr. Bartelink,
Yes.
and counsel brought this up. Obviously, Dr. Bartelink is the defense expert in this case. Is that right?
To my knowledge, yes, that's what I've been
Well,
advised.
you did read his report, right?
Yes, I
And
did.
his findings.
Yes.
And you find that your findings are consistent with Dr. Bartelink's?
Yes, our examination requests were somewhat different and our report formatting significantly different, but in terms of the substantive content of our analyses of Tylee's remains, there were no substantive differences.
Now, one of the areas I'd like to delve into a little bit is is there a specialty within each of your occupations as a forensic anthropologist? Do you have a particular focus that differs from Dr. Bartelink's?
Not especially. Most anthropologists, especially those who are board certified, have a core set of knowledge and expertise. A lot of my research has been in the area of skeletal trauma and skeletal imaging.
And are you aware of whether a lot of what Dr. Bartelink's focus has been on throughout his career?
Not specifically, no. I'm familiar with some of his work, but I do not have access to his reports or findings.
Okay.
I just have to pause and say that I've learned so much during this trial and Lori Vallow's trial from so many different experts. I mean, where else can you sit and listen to a forensic anthropologist and a tool expert who we'll hear from in a minute. His whole job is to inspect bones and find out which tools may have impacted them. And then you hear from an FBI guy who analyzes cell phone towers and is able to track it. And the fact that the prosecutors were able to put together so far 64 witnesses and probably get over 70 by the time they're done, it's mind-blowing in a way to me. I mean, where do you even start to try to put all of this together so that the jury understands it and that every base is covered? It's a wonder, really, to behold that all of these things work out. And then also, not to discredit the defense at all, they find their own experts. The fact Pryor was able to find this, what's his name, Bartelink, and bring him on to testify, and he's able to find and prepare his case. Say what you want about the legal system, but it can be pretty impressive to watch and to see how it all works. Okay, next we heard from someone we haven't heard from before. Her name is Ashlyn Rind, and she's described herself as Tylee's best friend. She knew Tylee real well, and here's just a little bit of her testimony. She was only on the stand for 8 minutes, but it was kind of an interesting spot to have her come in and testify in the midst of all of these experts, maybe have a little breather for the jury in the midst of all this deep testimony. But here's what Ashlyn said.
What kinds of things would you and Tylee do together?
We would go on drives together, talk about just teenage things, our high school boy drama with friends, what was going on in her life, what was going on in mine. We would just spend a lot of time together, just hanging out like at home and stuff.
Did you feel like you knew Tylee pretty well?
Very well, yeah.
Did you ever go to Tylee's house in Chandler?
Yes.
About how often would you visit Tylee at her house?
Frequently, I would even say once a week, maybe twice a week even.
And in visiting Tylee at her house, did you ever meet any of her family members?
I did, yes. I met Charles, I met Lori, JJ. I met Alex before too.
And could you just briefly describe kind of what you observed about Tylee's relationship with JJ?
Almost maternal in the sense that she was always there to make sure he was cared for. First priority was making sure his well-being was always taken care of, and she would be next.
We've heard that so much about Tylee, that she really just cared for JJ, and he looked to her, and she was kind of like a second mother, you could say, in a way. I'm sure she wouldn't want to be described as that, but just someone that cared for her little brother. After Ashlyn, we jumped to the next witness, who is David Sincerbo, and he worked for Idaho State Police as an arson expert, like a fire expert, and his job is to test things for ignitable liquids. And basically things are sent to him in canisters, jars or canisters, I think they said. And then he's to go through the items, the whatever's in the canister, and determine if there was any sort of arson-related chemicals, liquids, whatnot. And he did get a canister from the site where Tylee was buried, and he said that inside of that canister there was gasoline and components indicative of decomposing flesh. So, however Tylee was burned, gasoline was involved based on his testimony. And right after him, we heard from Chuck Considus, the detective with Rexburg Police. And this is where he talked about the satellite images and the differences of the property between a certain number of days. And on September the 9th, there was some cloud cover. It would have been fascinating if somehow that satellite image could have somehow captured whoever was in the property that day, where you could tell who they were. Could you imagine if you're like in your backyard working one day? Have you ever seen, like on Google Drive, when on a Google Earth, when you go and pull up someone's address and they're like in the front yard, or you see somebody walking down the street who the camera just randomly happens to capture? Could you imagine if that had happened that day and they had that satellite evidence? That would be unreal. They don't have that, but he talked about the differences in the property and pointed out noticeable marks on the satellite maps that changed on some key dates. Here's what the detective said.
Do you recognize this property? Yes, this is the property of Chad Daybell, located at 202 North 1900 East. in
And
Fremont-
again,
Fremont County.
what date was this picture taken?
August 27th, I believe.
Do you recognize this image?
Yes, this will be the image from September 2nd, 2019.
And I'm going to zoom in. Do you recognize this property?
Yes, this is an image of Mr. Daybell's property.
Do you recognize this image?
Yes, this will be the image from September 9th, 2019.
I'm going to zoom in. Detective Considis, was there anything on this image that drew your attention?
Yes, if you,
Do you-
use the pointer.
Yes, please.
Okay. When looking at the screen, to orient yourself with Mr. Daybell's property, the main house is here on the left-hand side. This is the outbuilding, the garage, and then directly straight out from that, you see that little discoloration, and that is in the immediate area where we discovered Tylee.
Can you point to the discoloration you're talking about?
Right there.
Were you able to see that same discoloration on the previous two photos?
No, they're not visible.
Detective Considis, on the days of June 9th and 10th, did you personally aid in removing Tylee Ryan's remains from Chad Daybell's property?
Yes.
And he had a tear rolling down his face when he said that. So I don't know how well you could see the image there. I don't think you could see it very well. But there is some cloud cover on that day. But there was a clear, darker mark on the property where they found Tylee's body. So from Considis, I'm telling you, they moved through witnesses quick. We're not even at lunch yet. They were going through witnesses fast this morning. And John Pryor didn't have much cross-examination on a lot of these. And if he did, it was, just a few minutes. Doug Halapaska, I apologize. This is the tool expert. And I'm not going to go too deep on this. Again, you can go and listen to his testimony if you want. But basically, on all of the bones he examined of Tylee, there was damage either in the form of a chopping or a stabbing type puncture wound injury. And these could have been done with a variety of tools, a machete, an axe, a cleaver, things like that. He did not actually test any of the tools at Chad Daybell's property. And what he would have done if he had had the tools is he would have looked at the bone from how he explained it and put like a casting substance over the mark, over the wherever the injury was, harden and then take it off. I believe this is how I understood it. And then compare it against like a tool, like a specific shovel, or see if it fit that. He didn't do that. And on all of these, he could not be 100% sure that it was a specific tool. On like the stabbing one, was it an actual pickaxe or was it a machete or something? He couldn't say that 100% on any of that. But what he could say 100% is that tools were used on Tylee, on her body. And here is, again, just a little clip of him. And I got to tell you, this is, they moved the courtroom, everybody on the right, over. They showed the photos to the jurors, not on the live stream and not to us in the courtroom. But it was photo after photo after photo after photo of the markings on the bones of these tools. And it was hard to listen to. And, I don't know the jurors. I didn't get their read on it, but many were, taking notes, looking closely. It kind of became repetitive, to be honest with you. You hate to say that, but they had all these different parts of her that were affected by these tools. And so he testified about each part. And here's just one little snippet of what he said.
The left side of that damaged area, you can actually see a long fractured area that was actually carried into the injury itself. Like I said, the force came from left to right, but there was another observation that was made at this time. The red arrows are showing that there's these scallop-shaped portions of the tool mark. Those are consistent with being from a serrated tool, kind of like a saw, but in this case, this was not produced from a sawing action. It was produced from a bladed tool that had serrated teeth on it.
So he went through and said similar things about all the other bones. Let's just pray that that all of these happened post-mortem after she died, because I cannot even fathom the scene out there. Can you? Can anybody understand this? The burning and the injuries on the bones. I mean, you can't even comprehend it. And the big question so many of you have, and me, is where all did this happen? Did this all happen right there by the fire pit? The fact, did the injuries to the bones and did that happen somewhere else? Then they came and dumped it all there at the fire pit. And how long was it burning? I mean, so many questions that we didn't get answered in Lori's case, and I don't know if we're going to get them answered here. But it's just, where all did this happen? I've interviewed Brian Wood of Wood Funeral Home in Idaho Falls, and I've gone into the crematorium where they cremate bodies, and that the oven gets up to, I don't know, some ridiculous amount of degrees, 3,000 or something, I don't remember. And they keep that oven on for 12, 14 hours overnight sometimes, just to be sure that the body is completely cremated. Well, how long was Tylee burning? I don't, anyway, just so many questions I have, and I wish you all email me these things, and I wish I had an answer. And I wish the people that I talk to that are involved in the case, or that I have talked to in the past, not during the trial, but in the past, they don't know either. Then it was lunchtime after that, and after lunch, it was a late lunch today because there was some issues with getting the jurors their lunches. I don't know what they had. I'll have to find out. But they were late. Lunch was late. So we went to lunch around 12:30 and got back in the courtroom around 1:30. And Nick Balance was back on the stand. He's the guy who talked about the cell phone casting. You know, the cell phone towers and how the towers are divided into sectors, and you can find out where texts and cell phone calls are sent from and whatnot, and text messages, all that sort of stuff. He was back, and he talked about some specific dates. For instance, on October 8th of 2019, the day before that gunman, Alex, showed up in Tammy's driveway, he bought a track phone from Walmart, one of those burner phones. And there was so much phone activity between Lori, Chad, Alex on the 9th, the day that Tammy was shot at. There was a lot of texting, a lot of activity happening. There was proof that Alex had gone down to the Salem church. His phone was in that area. They were able to track him down to Idaho Falls at the Sportsman's Warehouse. But here's just part of what Mr. Balance said about Alex's activity.
Sure. So we're looking at October 9th of 2019 between 12 o'clock and 29 seconds and 1:23 p.m.
And what is the data that's being displayed?
So this is all the Google location history during that time. And so I show 18 Google locations reported via Wi-Fi for Alex Cox's Google account. And they are all consistent with being at Lori Vallow's residence during that time.
And just, Agent, is there a reason you looked at the geolocation and cellular data for October 9th of 2019?
I was asked to look at that due to an attempted assault on Tammy Daybell that occurred that day.
Okay,
And if you
then
can explain for the jury what they're seeing on slide 72.
So here we're looking at October 9th at 1:05 PM. And this is from the Homer J. Maximus Gmail account. Google also, if you opt in to have your search history maintained, then that would be stored associated with the account. So this is one of the search items that was made from Alex Cox's Google account, one of the searches that was made.
And why was that search significant to you?
So it was a search for Auburn, Alabama zip code. And so the phone number mentioned previously that was associated with Alex Cox from the track phone that was purchased at Walmart, it had a Auburn, Alabama area code.
okay, there we go. So Alex buys a phone on
And
October
what do you
8th.
see on slide 73?
Still talking.
So again, this is looking at Google location history associated with Alex Cox's Google account, showing that the device moved between 123 and 0 seconds to 123 and 32 seconds, consistent with going from Lori Vallow's apartment to Alex Cox's apartment.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I jumped the gun there. Alex buys this phone, this track phone from Walmart the day before that Tammy is shot at. He's activating it. It's an Alabama number. It's able to show all over the place where he's going. On the 9th, the next day, when Tammy's shot at, they track him going from Sportsman's Warehouse in Idaho Falls, all up and down to Salem, where Chad lives. He's busy. He's on the move. Then we hear about the activity on October 18th. This is the day before Tammy dies. She dies on the 19th. There was activity late into the night, text messages between, maybe there was sexting, I don't know, but there was text messages between Lori, Chad, and Alex. A lot of them, and a lot of calls. And Alex, again, was tracked, or his device, I should be saying their devices, was tracked there at that Salem church, which is about 1.5 miles or a little less from Chad Daybell's house. And here is a little bit of the explanation as far as the cell phone activity on the day that Tammy Daybell passed.
Sure. This is looking at interactions between the 8260 phone associated with Chad Daybell and the AT&T network, utilizing a tower and sector that provides coverage to the residents, the Chad Daybell residents, excuse me. And there are 3 outbound text messages that are sent to the 4652 phone associated with Lori Vallow.
And what do we see on slide 92?
So this is associated with the 9120 phone attributed to Alex Cox, an interaction with the Verizon network, making an outbound call to the 4652 phone associated with Lori Vallow, utilizing a tower and sector that would provide coverage kind of southwest Rexburg. And that call is approximately, it's 977 seconds. So approximately 16 minutes and 17 seconds, if I did my math right.
So that's a call from a number associated with Alex Cox to a number associated with Lori Vallow.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And this is down in the general Rexburg area. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And so just for timing, I'm going to go back 2 slides. What was the last known time that the Homer J. Maximus account was located at the Salem church?
That was at approximately 10:45 and 26 seconds PM.
All right. And they go into much more detail. There's a lot more back and forth of basically tracking all of the activity with those cell phones. And court was out at 2:30. The prosecution went through witnesses much quicker than they thought. Again, John Pryor did not have a lot of cross-examination. And I wonder if that might be a theme this week. We do know tomorrow, I believe Rob Wood said that the first witness will be a doctor on the stand. So we'll see what that witness has to say. Still waiting to see if Audrey Baratario is going to get called. That will be interesting if she is. I mean, she is the one who, when Lori first reached out to her via text, or Audrey or Lori, they were talking about how it's so nice to talk to someone who really knows what's going on, almost as if Chad had groomed Audrey before he met Lori. But she took the stand in Lori's case. She has not yet. So we'll see what other witnesses they have coming up. And then, of course, we know that Chad Daybell, his attorney, plans to call at least 3 of Chad's children. And that could happen, when they start their defense. And then this expert, if he still plans to call him, the anthropologist, after today, if he still plans to call him, sounds like he will, though. I mean, he did a report, and might as well have him testify to that. And then a couple of other expert witnesses. So there we go. I as I told you, today was a lot about Tylee. I wanted to share this photo with her and her cousins at dinner a couple of years ago, and just hanging out with her cousins. And again, we saw a lot of awful photos today, and hopefully the jurors can remember this photo and who Tylee was, being this person rather than what we saw portrayed on the screen today. And we also remember JJ and Tammy and Charles as well. All right, we have a lot of shout outs. We have a lot of questions coming in. You guys are so inquisitive, and it's amazing. I have to start with Brenda Egbert. I was sitting in the hallway today waiting to get into court, and Brenda's niece, I believe, came up and said that Brenda lives in Cache Valley, Utah, and is battling cancer at the moment. And she made me these Harry Potter goodie bags. And there's candy, there's goodies stuffed inside with like Tootsie Rolls and gummy worms and all sorts of delicious treats. That just what I need. Lifesaver gummies. My kids are going to love these. And of course she used Harry Potter because Chad Daybell said he felt like Harry Potter. So Brenda, thank you so much. What a thoughtful, nice gift. And these are nice little bags. Like they have the whole drawstring and everything. So thank you so much for bringing those by. And several other people too have brought me candy too. So y'all are the best, keeping me all sugared up. Okay, but we have a baby, Liam, who was born today. We have a baby, not me and my wife, someone else. Paige, Mama Paige, Grandpa Tony, baby Liam is watching Courtroom Insider for the very first time tonight, and they sent me a pic. Look at this. There we go. Look at that baby. Born this morning. Baby Liam, you have a great future ahead of you. Thank you to Tony, to Paige, to the whole family who sent that. So happy for you. Okay, where am I going, Peggy? Shout outs to, all these people who sent us kind gifts on YouTube. Kathleen Robinson, thank you. Kath T, C.A. Bever Forden, and Kath T. Thank you all so much. And a couple of other shout outs too. I have so many windows open. I don't know if you're like me. Denise Daw, John Peck, Christy Fredericks, thank you. Lindy Marsha, good to see you. Kathy Jones, Mark Harris, Sandra Stevers, Kelly Peterson, Nicole Morris, and Jane Seifert. Good to see you. Thank you all so much for watching. First question from Mark and Patty. What fundamental differences have you seen between the Vallow prosecution compared to the Daybell prosecution? Ooh, that's a good question. Fundamental differences, definitely a lot more focus on Tammy this time around, without a doubt. Tammy they've really called more witnesses in relation to her death and stuff like that. There has been, what else? I don't know. That might be the main one. Fundamental differences. I'm trying to look at the witness list to see if there was any big ones. I'll have to think about that one. I would definitely say though the Tammy angle has been different. We've had a defense. We've had John Pryor, so that's been a big difference. We've actually had someone questioning them. John Thomas and Jim Archibald did as well. I don't want to say they didn't, but this is a far more aggressive defense. What I'm looking forward to is once the defense goes, hearing the prosecutors cross-examine the defense witnesses. We've never heard that. Lori Vallow didn't have any witnesses, so we will hear for the first time these prosecutors question the defense witnesses, and that should be interesting. I'm sure there's other differences too, and I would say that those are kind of the main ones. I'm wondering, Shannon, if you know or think Christopher Parrott will testify in Chad's trial. Christopher Parrott runs the website AVOW, Another Voice of Warning. In his vindicated post on AVOW back in early 2020, when the children were still missing, he stated he had a 54-minute phone call with Chad and Lori. During this call, Chad and Lori supposedly explained to him exactly where the children were and why, a false story. I'd love to know what the explanation was made to Christopher, so sure they had done nothing wrong while the whole world searched for these children. Christopher Parrott defended them up until the day that the kids were found, and then did an apology, from what I understand. And I have not heard much from him since, but he's always welcome to come and talk to me. He declined all media interviews in the early days, sent us some pretty, forceful emails. Anyway, I doubt he'll get called as a witness, but that would be interesting. That would be interesting. He was in communication with Chad and Lori. Rob says, do you think that Tylee was maybe dismembered somewhere else than moved, which would account for the carnivore marks on the remains? Yeah, that's what I wondered, Rob. Although the timing would have had to be fairly quick, because she was seen at Yellowstone that weekend, and then on the 9th she was buried there at the property. So it could have been done elsewhere, and there weren't any cell phones tracking or whatnot available, and then they moved her. Possibly. Or it happened in the night. The other thing someone asked is, not someone here, but earlier today I was asked by another reporter about what were signs that Chad Daybell was involved perhaps in the actual burying of Tylee. Well, we know that he Googled the south-southwest wind direction the day before, what the wind direction was going to be. Jane says, you've talked about the rule of exception for witnesses who are also victims, as they're allowed to watch trial coverage prior to testimony. I'm wondering if that exception applies to Chad's kids as well. It does. Chad's kids can watch. They are the children of Tammy, who was a victim. If not, when the kids eventually go up to testify, they'll be going in blind, so to speak, to all the extra evidence against their dad that's piled up in the trial so far, because they weren't allowed to watch it. Well, they are allowed to watch it, but I don't know if they are. The Chad Daybell very well could have told his kids not to watch it, and maybe they're not. So I don't know. I don't know what will come out with their testimony, but they have stood by their dad from the beginning, and maybe if they are watching it, this has been an eye-opener. If they listened to any of Lori Vallow's trial last year, they would have learned a lot as well. So I don't know. That'll be a key part of this trial when his children are on the stand. Bernice, if Lori gets the death penalty in Arizona, does that override her sentence in Idaho? It would, Bernice, but she's not up for the death penalty in Arizona, because she's charged with conspiracy. And from what I understand, that like in Idaho, you have to have aggravating factors for the actual murder. So the crime she's charged with there, the maximum penalty is life in prison. She is still, though, an Idaho inmate. So whatever happens in Arizona, she'll get sentenced, then they'll bring her back here, and she will serve out her sentence here. She's kind of on loan to Arizona. Now, if she was a death penalty case and they did put her to death, I imagine they would keep her. So, it goes back and forth about how these states, try to get along with these complex criminal cases. Kelly asked, and this is probably one of the things I'm asked the most, why does Chad Daybell get a computer? And every time there's a sidebar and the security walk by, he closes it a little bit. I have not seen people on trial get a computer, only Chad Daybell, and he does type on it. He's had a computer for a long time. That's where Lori had a computer too. They got permission from the judge, from the court, to have that years ago when they were in jail, so that they could review the evidence against them. It doesn't have access to Wi-Fi. I think even if it did, the jail does not have Wi-Fi. And so Chad Daybell would sit in his cell and he would go through all of the evidence that was against him. Lori Vallow would do the same thing. I don't know if the live camera feed shows this, but the deputy actually walks in carrying the computer, puts it on Chad's desk. He sits there. It's not like he gets to take it back with him. From what I understand, I don't think he does. I think he has it there in the courtroom, and I think all the evidence is loaded on there, so he will be scrolling. And then he doesn't want the bailiff, I guess, to see. He doesn't want the crowd, those of us in the audience, to see it. It would be a hard time seeing it, but Lori just didn't bring hers to court. She brought a notepad, and Chad does take notes. He goes back and forth between the notepad and the computer and whatnot. Annette, I'm curious if you've ever seen any reaction from Judge Boyce when he sees the graphic evidence. I have not. He's been pretty even kill. I've seen a couple of smiles sometimes, like on Friday when Samantha testified and John Pryor said, "Objection, I want to know when this happened," and she immediately shot back at him. It happened December before the judge could rule, and he just let it go. Judge Boyce did smile a little. Today there was a little moment with the jury where he was asking, like, "Do you want to go on break now, or do you want to wait?" And they were like, "We want to wait," and they all kind of laughed. So there has been that, but I haven't seen Judge Boyce lose it emotionally or have any sort of reaction. Judges really can't. I went to a training about it after the Lori Vallow trial with the district administrative judge in Idaho Falls, and he talked about how judges, you rarely see a judge cry, you rarely see them have emotion. They have to really keep it in check. They have to really be sure that they're fair. It would be a hard job to be a judge. I wouldn't want it. And not only is the judge maintaining order here in the gallery where all of us are watching, making sure no one has their phones up or all of that, but he's also keeping the trial running. And he's got to, you think about it, you have to be engaged every second, because if there's an objection, you have to rule immediately. It's not like you can say, let me think about that. You got to rule right away and keep it going. And so there's a lot to it. And Judge Boyce, when this all started, he was fairly new at being a district judge. I don't even think he'd been a judge a year. And all the players pretty much in this were new when this happened. Cassandra, did the jury notice Chad laughing when the state said the next witness was in the restroom? Oh, I didn't even notice that. Was Chad laughing? He may have. So I told you a minute ago about how the jury said, we want to just keep going, we don't want to take a break. And then they said, actually, we just found out the witness is in the restroom. Everybody kind of laughed, but I don't know if they saw Chad laugh or not. There were moments, too, in Lori's trial where she would laugh. I mean, if there'd be a funny moment. Lori, like I said, I've said in the past, she showed far more emotion than Chad Daybell has. You could kind of read Lori as far as what she was thinking, or on some days. On some days, she was just stoic. On other days, she was smiling. I mean, one day she smiled at me, and she's just herself, I guess. Okay. Do you know if any insurance money in question has to be paid back? Technically, Marion, yes. Will it happen? No. If Chad Daybell is found guilty, he will be ordered to pay restitution on the insurance money, on the insurance fraud charge. On that charge, you have to pay them back for the money you spent, but how in the world is he going to do that? You know, he's not. And I know many of you have asked, well, if he gave the money to someone, to his kids, will they have to pay it back? I would imagine they would have to be charged with a crime, and then they'd have to, but you can't really, I mean, if he went out and bought a car, you can't go to the car dealership and say, give us back the $20,000, because they were an unknowing person involved in it. So yeah, he will be, if he's found guilty, have to pay it back. Same with the grand theft, same with anything like that, but it often does not happen. Do you think Dr. Bettelink role will be an expert witness for the defense? Oh, Rob asked that. Yeah, we talked about that a minute ago. He will be. Well, he's on the list. They talked about that today, that he's supposed to be. Nate, can you show us a satellite image of Chad's backyard showing ground discoloration? I kind of did already. You can't really see it. But I'm sorry. It's really hard to see, especially on a quarter of a screen and then a screen of a screen. But you could see it in the courtroom. It looked like a little black dot. But it was obvious from where I was sitting, from, seeing it on the screen. Did the jury react to any more testimony? Did the jury react to any testimony more than others? And I don't mean it's graphic. That's from Poet. Poet, I don't know if you mean today or overall. I've noticed overall they were very engaged and moved by Samantha and Jason on Friday, Tammy Daybell's sister and brother-in-law, and having Samantha's other brothers in the courtroom who were very emotional, I think really hit some of those jurors. I noticed one juror who kept watching them. There's been other jurors where Zulema, they really took notes. As far as today, I don't know if today, well, I mean, I'm sure they're definitely all impacted by today, but I haven't noticed one in particular today. And also, I wish that I had eyes on the jury at all time, and then another set of eyes on Chad at all time, and then another set of eyes on the witness at all time, another set of eyes. There's so much happening, and most of the time I'm in my computer typing what was just said. So there's chances I miss stuff, but I sit by a reporter from Court TV and a producer, and she'll like nudge me like, hey, check this out, or I'll do the same to her, and we'll kind of work with each other, and other reporters that come in too, and members of the public. Some of you have sat by me and been like, hey, did you see that? I'm wondering, Heather says, if Tammy's hairdresser was interviewed and if Tammy gave any reasons for such a huge change in her haircut. Women don't make such a change like that for no reason. Heather, that is the first I've heard of the hairdresser and her getting a haircut. I can tell you that one of the photos that's out there that we even used in the beginning, it was Tammy's Halloween costume, and we didn't know that. The family told me one day, like, that photo that everyone's using, all the media, that was her Halloween costume, and she had it really short. So I don't know if that's the photo you're referring to, but if it is, that was actually a Halloween costume and not her haircut. I don't know if she actually got a haircut around this time, but I can try to find out. Please clear up once and for all who is paying for Pryor. Well, I don't know all the specifics, but I assume when Chad Daybell hired John Pryor, they had an agreement of a large, again, my guess, upfront payment. And whether that's $50,000, $100,000, I don't know. Because, going into this case, there's going to be a lot of time spent on it. So, Chad Daybell had that cash up front, one would assume, from the insurance payouts. So he could have given Pryor X amount of dollars. And then when the money came up and was gone, when all of it had been used, and how attorneys bill, some bill by the 10-minute mark, some bill by the 7-minute mark. I mean, I don't know. It can be crazy how, the billing works. But when the money's gone, Pryor probably went to him and said, okay, what else can you put up? And so Chad Daybell apparently put up his house and gave it to John. John Pryor had a lien on the property. And now if you look at the records, the public records, John Pryor is listed as the owner of the home. I don't know what the home's valued at. Maybe just a pure guess, $300,000 to $500,000, maybe more because there's the property. Like it's actually a bigger acre. So you think about if Pryor got, and these are just numbers I'm throwing out, $50,000 up front plus $300,000, $400,000 from the property, you get $350,000. He's been on the case since 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24. That's 5 years. So let's just say he ends up with $350,000 divided by 5. That's like $70,000 a year. For an attorney, that's not that much, especially on a capital case like this. Guaranteed John Thomas and Jim Archibald were making a lot more than that, and because they were public defenders. Thus, Chad Daybell's attorney, Pryor, went before the judge earlier this year and said, my client can no longer pay me. I need to be off the case. He can't pay me, and I can't find death penalty qualified co-counsel. Well, then during the argument, which you can go back and listen to, he kind of spoke both ways. Pryor's like, I'll do it for free. I'll do it, but I believe I should get paid, but I'll do it for free. Then he was allowed to go before the money judge to ask if there were any funding from the state that might be able to assist. We don't know how that worked out. We don't know if he is getting state money. And he was not able to get co-counsel. So think about all that. But then think about these expert witnesses he has to bring in and the witnesses. So when he brings in Chad Daybell's kids, they've got to travel. They've got to probably stay in a hotel. They've got to eat food. The defense will pay for all of that. Like the prosecutor pays for the witnesses. These expert witnesses, most of them who take the stand, they charge an hourly rate. And they you pay them for that, for their time, for their expertise. So there's a lot there. There's a lot to pay for. So I don't know exactly. Well, Chad Daybell is paying for him, and it ended up that the judge specifically flat out asked Chad Daybell, do you want John Pryor as an attorney? And Chad Daybell said yes. And then they went into chambers, and he again said, do you want him to remain with you? And Chad Daybell said yes. So Judge Boyce said, sorry, you're sticking with him. You're not getting off the case. And had he got off the case, could you even imagine that we would have had another 3 or 4 years of waiting for this trial? Elizabeth, what can be asked of Chad's kids if they're called? Is there a limit? Not the defense can ask them anything, and then the prosecution has to stay within the bounds of what the defense asks. You can't go, out of bounds beyond the scope. So if the door is wide open for the defense, the prosecutor can keep it wide open too. Where can I watch the video of Alex and Lori walking around the geysers at Yellowstone with the kids? Anybody know? Lori, this lady is named Lori who asked the question. I have not seen a video. I don't think there's video. There's just photos. I haven't seen any video. Maybe there's video out there, but I have not seen it. Morgan, can you add the drawings from last year to the witness list, like the bones? It would be nice to see what they're talking about. We can look and see. I think that there were some bones that were drawn. I can look and see. Daisy says, can Chad still take a plea? If Chad Daybell walked into the courtroom tomorrow and said, okay, I want to plead guilty. Take death penalty off the table. I'll plead guilty today and give me life in prison. I think the prosecutor would do it. Even though we're this far along, that guarantees that, one, the trial can finish, but two, they have a sentence. They don't have to rely on the jury, and it's over. You wouldn't have to go into the penalty phase. It's done. Could you imagine if that happened? Why is Chad's trial televised, but Lori isn't? Galen asked. Well, Judge Boyce decides that. Judge Boyce didn't want Lori's televised for a few reasons. One is that Chad Daybell's trial was coming up, and so he was worried that potential jurors could watch Lori's. With this trial, there's no other trial here in Idaho. I think that was the main one. That was the main reason why he said that he allowed this one to be televised. What do you all think? Do you like it? Do you like it being televised, and do you watch it, or do you mainly just like that? Like, just go on and catch up later. Okay, a couple more, and then I'm going to log off. Okay, Chandra, did they purposely turn off mics during the anthropologist testimony? No, they didn't. They just forgot to turn them on. And believe me, I know it's frustrating for you all at home. When they do sidebars, they kill the mics, and then they didn't turn them on again. And we try to advise people like, hey, the mics are off, so sorry. Beyond our control. We don't control the mics. Chad had a mortgage. Who paid it off so he could give it to Pryor? Terry says. Terry, I don't know all the details of that. I don't think it was paid off, but I don't know. If Tylee was murdered at the site, there would be blood in the soil, right? Brenda asks. Well, there was body decomposition fluids. We know that. And yeah, you would think there would be blood. Freedom Queen. What was the date Chad told Zulema she was his daughter who was RPD and killed in one of the past lives? Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm sorry. What was the date Chad told Zulema she was his daughter who was RPD and killed in one of her past lives? I'm not really sure about that one. Paul says, we'll end with Paul. And by the way, another quick shout out to Gretchen and Jackie. Thank you for your donations. We really, really, truly appreciate that. Oh, and for those of you that ordered shirts, we should be getting them this week. So I'm hoping that some of them or most of them will be in the mail by Friday. So thank you all for buying those. Paul says, do you know what kind of impact this has had on some of these groups like AVOW? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if the content type has switched. I don't know if, people are realizing that maybe there's other stuff out there. That would be a good, interesting thing to follow up on. I know that I've had several people contact me and be like, I was curious in energy healing. I was curious in exploring that, and not anymore. I'm not going into energy healing or things like that. That's just, one perspective. Everyone that practices energy healing doesn't end up with children who are dead. I mean, obviously this was such an extreme thing. It's like every sort of story we cover where there's some people that just really take it to the extreme, and obviously that seems to be what happened here. All right, tomorrow morning we'll be back at it in the courtroom, 8:30 a.m. We are live with the doctor on the stand and then other witnesses. I'll be doing my live written updates all day, and then of course join me back at it 6:30 tomorrow night Mountain Time for Courtroom Insider. Here is where you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, X/Twitter, and East Idaho News YouTube. If you want to go watch all of the videos, you can do that and get you caught up on everything you need to know about this case. And we probably still have a few more weeks doing this, so I hope you're not getting tired. Hope you're still engaged. Hope it's still interesting, but always open to your feedback. You're welcome to reach out and contact me. We gather all the questions from everywhere, so if you put them in the comments, Peggy, my wonderful associate, she goes through and pulls those questions, and we find them from everywhere. So don't worry if you're like, I don't know where to post it. I also can't answer every question, so please understand that. Okay, I hope you have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow.